The atmosphere in the prison was thick, cold, and harsh. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment Luna's scream tore through the night. A piercing, long, desperate, and painful sound echoed through the cold concrete walls, startling the guards, who dropped their keys. In her cell, Luna lay curled in a pool of blood, her face pale as if the life was being drained from every cell. The contractions came in waves, each like a knife cutting through her abdomen, forcing her to brace herself in a battle between her survival instinct and the depression that had imprisoned her from within. The first guard to arrive was stunned by the horrific scene, then shouted for a nurse. Blood spread across the floor, spreading like a red stain that kept growing, as if the prison itself were witnessing the punishment of an unknown sin. When the ambulance rushed through the iron gates, Luna was unconscious, still muttering the name of her unborn child. The doctor announced that it was a severe premature birth. The fetus was in critical condition due to lack of oxygen, and the mother's prolonged stress had caused the body to react by defending itself, pushing the baby out of the womb too early. The hospital room was filled with cold white light, four lines, ventilators, and a steady beeping sound like a clock counting down the fragile life. Bill appeared soon after, his face pale, his eyes red, his hands shaking as he looked through the glass of the special care room. In the incubator, the tiny baby, skin transparent as paper, lay motionless between countless four lines and breathing tubes, each weak breath like a plea from the void. Bill tried to hold back his tears, but his body trembled. Memories rushed back like a storm. The days when Luna smiled in the sun, her voice spoke of hope, of the child who would give her a reason to live, to redeem her mistakes. Now, before his eyes, life was slowly draining away because of invisible wounds caused by fear, loneliness, and guilt. He wondered if he was the reason why she had collapsed to this extent. If he had come sooner, if he had protected her from all the criticism, if he had not abandoned her on the night she was kidnapped, would the baby have lived a full life in her mother's arms? The question stabbed into Bill's mind like 1,000 small blades, and Luna, still lying on the hospital bed, her face lifeless, her eyes half closed, but tears still flowing. She dreamed of the Black Sea where she drifted aimlessly, heard a faint cry echoing in the distance, the cry of the child she had never held. The doctor announced that the baby's condition was very serious, suffering from a rare congenital heart disorder, and would need surgery if she wanted to survive. But her weak body and immature lungs made the risk of death many times higher. Bill stood there, silent, feeling as if everything around him had melted away, leaving only the sound of the ventilator and the cold ticking of the clock. Inside him was a storm torn between responsibility and helplessness, between the desire to save his child and the fear of losing Luna. He knew everything was against them, the disease, the past, prejudice, even fate. But when he looked at the baby in the incubator, so small that a light wind could blow it away, something inside him woke up. He vowed to save this child, no matter what. A crazy thought arose in his mind. Had someone orchestrated it all, pushing Luna into despair, causing her to lose control and give birth prematurely? Was this disease not just genetic, but the result of cruel interventions? In a world where everything could be bought, had this fragile life been turned into a commodity in the game of power? As Bill clenched his fists, his eyes darkened, And in an instant, the desperate man transformed into someone ready to defy fate. But outside the hospital room, it was raining, and the first thunder sounded like a warning that all salvation had a price. In the flickering light of the emergency lights, Bill's shadow stretched out on the wet tiles, like a human being gradually swallowed by the darkness spreading from his own heart. The haunting question popped into his mind. Was he fighting to save his child, or was he just trying to atone for his own indelible sins? In the cold hospital room, Luna's baby lay still in a glass cage, so small that even a strong breath would make its chest vibrate faintly. The mist covered the glass like a curtain separating that fragile life from the cruel world outside. Tubes, IVs, and needles intertwined like a web of fate, keeping the child between life and death. Each steady beep from the heart monitor was like a slow knock of fate, etched into the minds of those standing outside watching. Luna lay in the next room, her body as white as wax, her breathing faint and her eyes closed, seemingly still unable to shake off the nightmare of her bloody birth. The doctors tried to give her for fluids, measure her blood pressure, and check her every nerve response. But the silence in her body seemed to signal something more terrible was coming. When the CT scan results appeared on the screen, no one said a word. At the top of her skull, a large tumor pressed against vital brain tissue, spreading rapidly, like a dark shadow silently invading every part of her life. The doctor looked at Poppy, his voice hoarse but firm as he said that without immediate surgery, Luna would not survive the night. The information left Poppy numb. She felt her legs shake, her hands cold, while her mind flooded with memories of Luna, the strong girl who once stood in the light, now just a fragile body torn apart by the storm of fate. Poppy knew that signing meant giving Luna's life to the scalpel, but refusing meant watching her die on the hospital bed. Her heart felt torn in two, one part wanting to hold on, the other knowing that the only choice was to let go. Bill stepped forward, his eyes filled with pain and despair. He was no longer a strong man, but a broken soul, torn apart by the weak cry in the glass cage and the image of the woman he once loved lying between the series of IVs. He spoke briefly, his voice hoarse as if torn. If he did not operate, Luna would die. Poppy bit her lip, her hands trembling as she signed, the ink seeping into the paper like blood seeping into white cloth, marking the decision of life and death. Immediately, the surgical team was mobilized. White coats rushed down the hallway, pushing Luna's stretcher into the operating room. The sound of metal wheels rolling on the cold floor echoed, mixed with the sound of heavy rain outside. The operating room door closed, leaving only the red light on signaling that between this world and the other side, there was a soul being tested. In the waiting room, Poppy sat motionless, her empty eyes staring at the indicator light. Every minute that passed felt like an hour. Every small sound made her startled. Bill stood by the incubator window, looking at the baby as if searching for a reason to continue breathing. He couldn't bear the thought that Luna might die without hearing her cry a second time. Inside the operating room, surgical lights shone on Luna's pale face. The scalpel began to cut into her scalp. Blood seeped out, drops falling onto the white cloth. The doctors worked in absolute silence. Only the heart monitor beeped regularly and then suddenly fluctuated. Blood pressure dropped, heart rate erratic. One of the doctors shouted for medication. The whole room was as tense as a bowstring. Meanwhile, in the next room, the baby in the incubator suddenly had a slight convulsion. The monitor vibrated repeatedly as if sensing the danger that was happening to its mother. An invisible thread connected the two lives together, stretching across the hospital space, fragile as the light about to die. In the hallway, Bill suddenly felt suffocated, as if he himself shared Luna's pain. He bowed his head, clasped his hands, and prayed silently. But there was a vague fear that everything was predestined, that there were tragedies that could not be averted no matter how hard people tried. Hours passed, the operating lights still on. Poppy lost all sense of time. Only the sound of rain and the cold that penetrated her bones. When the door to the operating room opened slightly, she jumped up, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst. A doctor came out, his face covered in sweat, his eyes dark. No one knew if Luna was alive or not. She was carried out, covered in a white blanket, her face strangely peaceful, as if she were sleeping. But even in that sleep, one could feel the fragility between two worlds. One more short breath could be the end or a new beginning. In the corner of the room, Bill collapsed, his head tilted up to the ceiling, where the fluorescent lights flickered like a lost soul. The only question echoed in his mind, haunting and colder than the sound of the night rain. Could he save the two lives that were slowly leaving him? Or was this the moment when fate began to claim its debt? Dawn that day rose in silence, the dim light through the hospital windows, like a knife cutting into the despair of the survivors. The operating room was empty, except for the heavy smell of antiseptic and the blood-soaked white sheets that had not yet been changed. Luna was gone. Her heart stopped before the surgery was over. The doctor tried to revive her for 17 minutes, but no miracle appeared. The light of life inside her went out like a candle in a storm, leaving a cold void that could not be filled. The news was reported outside, and in that moment, time seemed to stop. Poppy froze. Her legs buckled, her hands covering her face, unable to cry. Bill stood still, his back against the wall, his eyes staring into space, as if he could not believe the truth was stabbing him straight in the heart. He did not scream, did not collapse, just remained silent, letting the pain spread through every vein, every breath. The sound of rain falling outside the window was like the cry of the earth and sky, dripping heavy, drowning everything in nameless melancholy. Luna's body was covered with a white sheet, and as the nurses pushed the stretcher through the hallway, Bill followed like a lost soul. He wanted to hold her, wanted to call her name, but his mouth could not utter a sound. Memories appeared like broken film, Luna smiling in the sunset light, her hand holding his in the days of hope, her soft lullaby when she was pregnant. All of it was now just an echo, like a last breath fading into the air. Bill stopped at the door of the incubator room. Through the frosted glass, the baby still lay there small, weak, between the IV tubes and the cold white light. Eyes closed, chest heaving vaguely. That was all that remained of Luna, a creature that had never known the warmth of its mother, had never heard its first call, had never felt the love that its mother had sacrificed to protect. When the doctor said the baby was still breathing, Bill seemed to wake up from his coma. He moved closer, his hand on the glass, feeling the cold seeping through his skin. In that moment, an invisible electric current ran through him, awakening an instinct he had never thought of, the instinct of a father. No more doubt, no more fear, only the naked truth that that little life was the only reason for him to continue to exist. He heard Luna's words echo somewhere in his head, faint as the wind, "Don't leave me alone." From that day on, Bill never left the hospital. He sat by the incubator all night, watching the baby's fragile breaths, as if afraid that if he turned away for a second, the baby would disappear with its mother. The doctor told him to rest, but he shook his head, his eyes never leaving the baby. He named her Hope, because it was the only thing Luna had left in this world of loss. Every morning, he cleaned his glasses, checked the ventilator, learned to understand the long and short beeps, and each time the heart needle oscillated, his heart contracted with it. He had been strong, had dealt with negotiations and loss, but he had never felt so naked as he did now, a man, with only a child to hold him to life. Poppy would come by occasionally, bringing clothes, food, and tears. She couldn't speak as she watched Bill sitting there, his body stiff, his eyes lifeless. But she knew he was keeping his promise to Luna, even though no one could hear, even though no one had forced him to. She had asked the doctor quietly about the baby's chances of survival, and the answer had been slim. But perhaps it was that fragility that made Bill cling even tighter. He began to study medicine, asking about medicine, about nutrition, about how people could prolong life with only love and faith. One night, as the moonlight shone through the glass, the baby suddenly moved. A small finger moved, touching the air lightly, as if reaching for its mother. Bill cried, for the first time since Luna left. Tears fell, reflecting the silver light like broken pieces of crystal. In that moment, he knew that Luna was still there, not in the flesh, but in every breath of her child, in every weak heartbeat, in every flickering light of the hospital lights. The day Luna was buried, Bill stood by the grave, holding Hope, the baby still breathing through a support tube, wrapped in a white blanket. It rained, the ground was soaked, and when the coffin was lowered, he just bowed his head, not crying, not speaking. He felt a faint warmth in the cold wind, like Luna's arms around his shoulders, and he knew she was watching. He whispered a promise no one could hear. He would raise the child. He would live in her place. No matter how cruel the world became, the following days, Bill brought Hope home. The room was empty. Everything still had Luna's scent. He placed the crib next to the window, where Luna used to sit and watch the sunrise. Every morning, he made milk, sang lullabies, learned how to change diapers, learned how to listen to cries. Those seemingly small things became the rope that saved him from the abyss of despair. Every night, when the baby slept, he sat silently, his eyes looking far away, wondering why life was so cruel, why people with the most beautiful hearts were the ones to leave first. But among the unanswered questions, he still saw one thing clearly. In the baby's innocent eyes, he saw Luna. Time passed, the wound had not yet healed, but Bill had begun to change. He was no longer the man who ran away from pain, but the man who dared to face, to love, to take on. Every breath of hope was a reminder that love could exist even after death. And when he saw her smile for the first time, That light pierced the darkness in his heart, making him believe that no matter how terrible the loss, life still knew how to go on. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the wind blew through the hallway, Bill would hear a faint lullaby, Luna's voice as light as mist, echoing somewhere in the room. He didn't know if it was memory, imagination, or if her soul had really not left. Each time like that, he held her close to his chest, whispering that they were both still here, still not forgotten. And in that moment, when the moonlight reflected on Hope's face, one could see Luna's image, her lips pursed in a smile, her eyes sparkling, as if she had never left this world. But deep inside Bill there was still an obsession that could not be extinguished. Was Luna really dead? Or was her memory still living in the child, waiting to wake up, look at him, and call him